New curfews and restrictions in place across the nation in an attempt to blunt the growing coronavirus outbreak. Tonight, we'll tell you what you can do to protect your family.
And an important step in finding a vaccine, how officials are working against time to test and develop a cure.
Plus, how the outbreak is leading to more flight cancellations and heightened frustration among tourists dealing with chaos and confusion. We'll tell you how the airlines are trying to handle the pandemic. This is BNC Prime News for this Monday, March 16th. I'm Fred Hickman.
And I'm Laverne McGee. Thanks for joining us. Millions of Americans facing new restrictions designed to slow the spread of coronavirus. Students in at least 31 states are out of school. Some restaurants are prohibited from inviting patrons inside, and public entertainment venues are becoming harder to come by.
And social distance is in full effect, as you can tell with Laverne and I keeping our distance here as well. The U.S. Surgeon General is calling the next 2 weeks critical in blunting this disease, discouraging gatherings of 10 or more people. New York City's mayor has closed all public schools until at least April the 20th, impacting some 1.1 million children and their parents. This move, as the city takes another drastic step, limiting restaurants and bars to takeout and delivery service only, mirroring efforts taken in states such as Illinois and Ohio, as the CDC discouraged events with 10 or more folks for the next 8 weeks. Voters in 4 states are still scheduled to head to the polls tomorrow, but others in future contests, such as Louisiana and Georgia, have already postponed their primaries.
Meanwhile, Wall Street went into a new tailspin today as the coronavirus outbreak sent a wrecking ball into the economy. The Dow lost almost 3,000 points, its worst point drop in history. That adds up to almost 13%, the worst percentage point loss for the index since the infamous Black Monday in 1987. The Nasdaq is down more than 12%, while the losses at the S&P 500 were just below that level. The fall triggered a trading shutdown earlier in the day. Stocks plummeted despite the Fed cutting its benchmark interest rate to 0 Sunday night. Investors are increasingly concerned that the outbreak will lead to a recession. Before the markets closed, President Trump said the outbreak could last until this summer. Investment bank Goldman Sachs estimates that the markets haven't bottomed out yet, but will make a quick comeback later in the year.
President Donald Trump gave an update on the U.S. response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as local governments have been issuing their own edicts and instructions to their residents and businesses. Nadia Romero is in Washington. She has the latest information.
The numbers are skyrocketing just from last week, with more than 70 deaths and 4,000 confirmed cases in the U.S. President Trump announcing new national guidelines for the next 15 days, and that includes limiting travel and limiting yourself to groups of 10 or less.
All Americans, including the young and healthy, work to engage in schooling from home when possible, avoid gathering in groups of more than 10 people, avoid discretionary travel, and avoid eating and drinking at bars, restaurants, and public food courts.
In New Jersey, curfew. In Miami, spring break canceled. Many schools canceled. Some cruise ships docked. More and more international flights grounded. Some breweries and wineries closed. As the number of coronavirus cases increases across the country, state and local governments are grappling to slow the virus.
You see a whole hodgepodge of efforts being taken across the country. This state is doing this state is doing this city is doing this. It's chaos.
On the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut teamed up on their coronavirus response.
We are in this together, and we're in it together not as towns and cities and states, but now increasingly as a region.
It's important for the young and healthy people to understand that while they may experience milder symptoms, they can easily spread this virus.
35 million students are home right now in 35 states due to the coronavirus closing down their schools. Recreation is at a standstill, and now there are many questions about our political system, with Super Tuesday number 3 happening tomorrow. Ohio's governor wanting to push back that state's primary until this summer. In Washington, I'm Nadia Romero.
Well, this is a very important step, a first step in finding a safe and effective vaccine for COVID-19. A participant in a coronavirus vaccine trial in the United States has been administered that first dose. The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases is funding this trial. The study aims to enroll a total of some 45 healthy adults over a 6-week time frame. Each participant will receive 2 injections about 1 month apart in varying dosage amounts. The study is meant to prove that the vaccine is indeed safe and induces a desired response from the participants' immune systems. However, experts do say that proving the vaccine is effective in preventing COVID-19 infection will require follow-up studies involving many, many more participants, and that would take many, many more months.
Actor Idris Elba says he has tested positive for the coronavirus. Elba tweeted today that he has no symptoms so far and has been isolated since Friday when he found out about his possible exposure. Elba is the latest high-profile celebrity to have tested positive for the virus. Last week, Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson said they had also tested positively in Australia. Elba, in a video message, said that his wife has not been tested yet, but is feeling well. So coronavirus does not care whether you're a celebrity, whether you're famous, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, black, or white. It is serious.
No respecter of persons whatsoever. And we should also mention San Francisco getting on board today. 6 counties in and around San Francisco have installed curfews at this point in time, and that affects some 7 million people.
My goodness. And people have been, of course, going out shopping, trying to prepare. But today, President Trump telling people to please be respectful of your neighbors, leave things. It's not a situation where you have to go out and buy up everything. And in fact, there was a report out of Newport, Oregon, where people were calling 911 because they ran out of toilet paper. Wow. Seriously. So again, people have to remain calm, use good judgment. We all have to try to get through this together.
Yeah, uncharted waters, we get it, but you got to be calm. You're absolutely right. Let's see, Florida, Illinois, Arizona, all pushing toward tomorrow's primary elections despite coronavirus. The governor's offices in those states say that they are not planning to delay their primaries. Georgia already postponing next week's primary, and Louisiana has postponed until April the 4th. The states are taking all the steps they can to limit voter and poll worker exposure to the virus. Still to come, airline passengers worried about exposure to the coronavirus. We'll tell you why travelers waited hours to board flights.
And if you shop online, your package delivery time may be getting slower. How the outbreak is impacting your online orders. Stay with us. You're watching BNC Prime News.
Around her, Lori Lightfoot is the mayor of Chicago, and yesterday she expressed frustration over crowds of passengers packing airport screening lines at O'Hare International Airport. President Trump and other U.S. officials appealed for patience as travelers returned to the United States and were met by long lines and massive delays at major airports so that they could be screened for the virus. Officials in the U.S. were responding to widespread complaints from passengers who said they had to wait hours and hours on long lines to enter the United States this weekend.
Obviously, both myself and the governor were very concerned about what we saw on the streets yesterday. People engaging in very foolish conduct. It's not just the fact that people were congregating in bars, I think that exceeded CDC guidance and frankly just common sense. But the other thing is we saw people engaging in very risky behavior, sharing drinks, sharing flasks, lines queued up. We have to stop that and shut that down. We're giving the bar owners an opportunity to be good partners on this, but if they can't police this and abide by the new restrictions, then we're going to look at taking further actions. We're giving them the opportunity today to show that they can get this right, but if they're not willing to do that and work with us, we're going to have to take more drastic steps, and unfortunately, that's going to mean more hardship on not only the owners but also the workers.
Some passengers expressing concerns that the long waits and crowds could put them at greater risk of contracting the coronavirus, which does cause the sometimes deadly respiratory illness COVID-19. In the U.S., the disease has infected about 3,000 people and killed at least 59. Mayor Lightfoot's concerns were shared by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases Director Anthony Fauci, who said that the crowded conditions at the airports were not helpful to the efforts to contain the virus for people returning from the United States. Of course, those European bans going into effect on Friday evening at midnight.
Yeah, travel definitely slowing down around the entire world. Canada, our neighbor to the north, has closed its borders. Only Canadian citizens and permanent residents are allowed into Canada. Spain is also on a lockdown. Italy, as we know, has been on a lockdown, and several other countries are following suit. Philippines, which is an island of about 57 million people, has gone under quarantine. So again, we're seeing around the world governments taking this extremely seriously. Here in the United States, we're only seeing San Francisco so far that is undergoing these sort of extreme conditions, but we all have to pitch in to try to contain this. And
a little over an hour ago, the Attorney General of the United States, to that end, we were talking about Italy being on lockdown. They were calling Italy the new China. China is where, of course, the disease was born. And people are wondering, well, is the U.S. going to be the next Italy? And the next 2 weeks are going to be critical toward that end. If they can get this thing contained, hopefully so, but he's not ruling that out. Yeah, we're going to have to see what happens, and hopefully people will adhere to the restrictions and the guidelines that President Trump outlined earlier today. Yeah, and they are guidelines. They're not actual rules as of yet, but it's not out of
Except
reach.
San Francisco.
Except for San Francisco and New York.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Amazon's well-known speedy shipping practices may be a little lagging now. The e-commerce giant says it's seen a surge in online shopping as the coronavirus outbreak spreads. Because of that, customers may experience shipping delays. Amazon says it's out of stock of some popular items, especially household staples. The company is also working to combat price gouging sellers. It pulled more than 1 million products earlier this month because of price gouging and false advertising, and they are also saying that they are planning on hiring up to 100,000 more people to enhance their workforce because of the increased demand. Still to come on BNC Prime News, a Tennessee man buys over 18,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. Why he is now apologizing to his community.
A man in Tennessee who came under public scrutiny for buying nearly 18,000 bottles of sanitizer is now donating his collection to charity. Matt Colvin was the subject of a New York Times article which detailed his trouble selling his stash online after Amazon cracked down on coronavirus price gouging. Colvin said that he and his family received threats after the story broke, and he has since apologized for his actions.
Beside myself of where we are with my family, and I'm scared for my family's safety. If by my actions anyone was directly impacted and unable to get sanitizer from one of their local stores because I purchased it all, I am truly sorry for that.
That sanitizer was donated to a nearby church.
One of Sin City's hotspots is shutting down because of the coronavirus. MGM Resorts announced yesterday operations are temporarily suspended at all its Las Vegas properties. The closure becomes effective tomorrow. No word on how long it will be. In a written statement, Chairman and CEO said slowing the progress of the virus requires everyone to take action. MGM Resorts says no reservations will be taken prior to May 1st. As of Sunday night, there were about 3,500 confirmed cases in 49 states, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Washington, D.C. The lone state without a report of the coronavirus as of yet is West Virginia. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends canceling or postponing events that have 10 or more people for the next 8 weeks.
The coronavirus has caused a number of things to shut down, including schools. NBA star LeBron James has decided that he would step up and help his community. The basketball star's I Promise Schools Family Resource Center will reportedly remain open to students and family. The executive director of the LeBron James Family Foundation told USA Today that James is passionate about the Family Resource Center staying open. The school is also partnered with Smuckers and an Akron Food Bank to prep and give care packages to its enrolled students and their families. The center has also remained open for families that need shelter, clothing, medical care, and mental health assistance.
Coming up, can your pets get the coronavirus? Next, we discuss how the pandemic can affect your animals.
And we're taking a look at San Antonio, Texas, one of the Lone Star's star cities.
Welcome back to BNC World Headquarters. Well, a lot of things are changing in our day-to-day lives at this moment, and people all over the globe are looking for ways to keep their families healthy and safe.
However, C.E. Huffman joins us now with some tips on how we can protect our pets and dispel some of the misinformation out there about the furry members of our family during the current coronavirus pandemic. C.E., hello.
Yes, guys, hello. This is mine right here. This is my baby. This is Alexi, and if you're like me, one of the most important parts of your life is your furry forever friend, and we want to make sure they're being protected and kept calm during this stressful time. More importantly, I want you to understand that as of right now, pets seem to be immune to coronavirus.
Multiple health organizations have all stated that domestic pets and animals are not at risk for contracting COVID-19.
Julie Castle is the CEO of Best Friends Animal Society, which runs the nation's largest sanctuary for homeless animals. Now, Castle says they can carry it on their fur, but the American Veterinary Medical Association, or AVMA, says it's, quote, very unlikely a person would contract the virus by petting or playing with the pets. Animals can spread other diseases.
Make sure that you bathe your pets and practice good hygiene with your pets. Wash your hands after petting your pet.
The AMVA also advising people who have contracted the novel coronavirus to limit interactions with their pets out of an abundance of caution. All experts agree the main theme right now is to use common sense.
You might want to figure out alternatives like walking your dog on a different route that isn't populated with so many people.
With so many people staying at home right now, Castle says it's actually the perfect time to enjoy your pet more and even consider fostering or adopting a new furry member of the family.
That's a proven fact that your pets can really, help calm you down, help calm the family down, because they are that constant.
And you know what? It is true. They can. You can get. I'm going to walk just a little closer. I got to keep my 6 feet distance from you guys. But it is true. When I go home, the first thing you want to do is gotta go take Lexi for a walk. We gotta hug each other. Yeah. You know what? And I'm fine with it. I think since we know now they're not carriers right now. That's what they know. I'd rather hug my dog, I think, than anybody right now.
As long as your pet isn't a bat, which is where it originally came from.
It's not. It is a dumb. You saw my child on here. I told them. I said, see, they're not pet people. See, they have actual children. See. So my child has 4 legs. That's what it is. Okay. So yes.
And all right. Wonder where the name Lexi came from.
From the great city of Lexington. Yes,
I know.
Yeah, he's trying to hate on Lexington. We love you, Kentucky. Everybody in Kentucky. Hello to my grandmother watching, my mother, all the aunts, everybody.
Yeah, I hope they're not
no, my
congregated
not
together.
Hey, she is locked in right now.
we could all use
sealed
a smile. So
all right.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
you. Still to come on BNC Prime News. Several voters expecting to hit the polls tomorrow. And we're going to see how the states expect to handle the voters amid the coronavirus pandemic.
And Kenyans adjusting to the pandemic. A look at life in that country as thousands of children stay home from school. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to BNC World Headquarters. I'm Laverne McGee.
And I'm Fred Hickman as we approach the bottom of the hour. A very important first step in finding a safe and effective vaccine for COVID-19. We mentioned this a little bit before, but it's worth mentioning again. A participant in a coronavirus vaccine trial in the United States has taken that very important first dose.
The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases is funding the trial and made the announcement today. The study aims to enroll a total of 45 healthy adults over a 6-week time frame. Each participant will receive 2 injections about a month apart in varying doses. The study is meant to prove that the vaccine is safe and induces a desired response from participants' immune systems. However, experts say proving the vaccine is effective in preventing COVID-19 infection will require follow-up studies involving many more participants, and that would take many more months. The trial run is out of the Kaiser Permanente Washington Health Research Institute in Seattle.
Social distancing. It's a term and instruction that we're hearing more and more and that we're practicing here at BNC as states across the country impose new guidelines to try to prevent the community spread of COVID-19. But with such sudden and drastic change to our everyday life, it can become quite overwhelming and anxiety-inducing. Practicing social distancing to mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic may sound a little bit scary or even impossible to do, but there are ways to appropriately handle the process. Florida, Illinois, Arizona, speaking of such, are all states that are going to be heading to the polls for primaries despite the coronavirus.
The governor's offices in those states say they are not planning to delay the primary. Reporter Whitney Wild has the latest. Whitney?
Well, this coronavirus is changing the way that these candidates are campaigning, and it is certainly rearranging the schedule.
In any other political cycle, the battle between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders would dominate headlines. Candidates would be out shaking hands and holding rallies, all to get in front of the most voters. But the world has changed because of coronavirus.
We bring many thousands of people out to our rallies. I enjoy it very much. We're not doing that right now.
I wash my hands God knows how many times a day with hot water and soap.
Election officials in Arizona, Florida, and Illinois vow to hold their primaries as scheduled on Tuesday. Many people concerned about coronavirus lined up to vote early.
I just don't want to get caught up in all the craziness with the virus and all the crowds, and I want to make sure that I get my vote in.
Monday, Ohio's governor recommended moving the primary scheduled for Tuesday to June. Already, other states postponed their primaries.
I've been to the grocery store. I saw the empty shelves. So it's probably the best thing to do right now.
Delaying the vote is a move Sanders agrees with.
I'm thinking about some of the elderly people sitting behind the desks, registering people, doing all that stuff. Does not make a lot of sense. I'm not sure that it does.
But President Trump says postponing primaries is unnecessary.
I think postponing elections is it's not a very good thing.
Election workers on Tuesday will wear gloves. Voting machines will be cleaned and sanitized, and election sites have moved away from retirement communities. All efforts to ensure the voting population is safe.
We are well now. We want to have our votes, whether we're alive or dead.
With a big ticket state like Florida in the mix tomorrow, this could be a monumental day. Joe Biden is looking for a chance to get closer and closer to that Democratic presidential nomination. Bernie Sanders is looking for a critical jolt to his campaign. Laverne, Fred?
And joining us now is Professor of International Law at Florida A&M University, a good guest of ours, Dr. Jeremy Levitt, good friend of the program. Welcome, Doctor. And I'll tell you that I have voted early here in the state of Florida, but what do you think the effect of the coronavirus is going to have in these critical elections in some fairly big states, and critical, of course, to Bernie Sanders even staying with us in this race?
Well, that's an interesting question. The presidential guidelines by the White House are very clear now that shouldn't be more than 10 people congregating in any one place. So clearly there's data and evidence that shows that the virus is being passed from person to persons who are in close proximity. We know that it has a 2 to 3 day life period on surfaces. So I think it probably will mean that some people will be staying home if they haven't voted early. And certainly African Americans are no exception in that regard.
Could this have a huge impact on the overall race coming up in November?
It could. It could potentially. If people didn't get in early voting and the public health experts aren't working with the people running the polls to ensure that it's a safe environment, it could mean a much lower turnout than one might expect. There is kind of this myth going around that we have to be aware of, that blacks may be immune. I want to say to everyone that that is entirely not true. There is no such thing as race-based resilience to COVID-19. And so I think people are scared, and I can see the election not just being affected in terms of low turnout, but it begs the question in a public emergency whether we should be postponing elections to begin with.
Dr. Levitt, let me ask you this, speaking in terms of November. If you are President Trump at this point, you've got not only the coronavirus disaster to deal with, but you've also got the economy, which you've banked on all of these 3 years. That's going down the tank, as well as the stock markets as well. How concerned are you right now heading to November?
Well, listen, I think the president and his administration erred, and they've acknowledged as such. They should have been on top of this in early January when the virus was discovered in Wuhan, China. The Secretary of Health and Human Services did declare a state of emergency, but they really took no significant action to warn the American population and the necessary precautions. We're now 3 months in. They're projecting up to 200 million people might be affected in the United States. This is a horrible catastrophe for the president, and when people's families begin to be affected, I think we'll see the result of that at the polls. What makes it worse is the president has not acknowledged that his administration has been slow to respond, but I think this is going to affect him at the polls, and it should affect him at the polls.
And looking beyond November into the future electoral process, now that we've had the coronavirus, do you see more states going the way of Washington State, where it's total mail-in so that people don't have to go to the polls, or there's some kind of way to do it online so that people can participate without actually having to physically go into a building and do it?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword there in some ways, because there's a lot of mixed messaging. On the one hand, they're telling people to stay home, to hunker down, not to congregate in a group more than 10. 2 days ago it was 50. 2 days before that it was 250. So people are scared and don't quite know how to react. At the same time, if we're going to introduce new technology to allow people to vote online, that'd be convenient, that'd be great. But as you know, we don't have the safest systems. We've had problems with electronic, not just polling, but voting in the past. We know that from some of what we're seeing on the internet, there is a covert campaign influenced again by foreign adversaries that are trying to project the American population in a way that will move into an air that there's a nationwide frenzy. We see that with some of the, not just the mixed messaging, but also with some of the messaging that's coming out about whether it's African Americans being immune, or whether there's going to be a national quarantine. So the mixed messaging, I think, is going to be a problem irrespective of the technology that's being used.
Dr. Levitt, do you think that this type of crisis is something that could change the politics of America forever, perhaps bringing Democrats and Republicans together more often for bipartisanship on matters of health care and the economy?
Well, I think part of that answer is it depends on who's in the White House and who's in the Congress, whether the Democrats control, whether Republicans control the personalities of the leaders. You would think that during a national catastrophe, we'd be able to come together as Americans. We would be able to demonstrate that historic resilience that is America and move past this. The president's tone has changed in the last 2 days. It needed to change in order for him to lead, for people to listen. I think he's gotten the memo and the message. How long it will last, we don't know. But whether it ushers in a new era of cooperation, I don't know. Sometimes when there's a third enemy and it's not the first and second enemy, you can coalesce those forces. I tend to think these things are temporary. When there's a new normal again, as long as the new normal doesn't restructure our economy and body politic in any significant ways, I think we'll go back to the partisanship that we've seen in the past 2 years.
All right, Dr. Jeremy Levitt in Orlando, please stay safe down there. We do know that you're not going to be going to Disney World anytime soon, but thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you tomorrow and beyond. Please stay with us, folks. Our special coverage continues right after the break.
Welcome back to BNC World Headquarters. Egypt will halt all air traffic at its airports beginning on Thursday until March 31st to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Egypt will sanitize hotels and tourist sites during the closure. Officials say there is no need for people to stock up. The last plane allowed to depart would leave on Thursday, March 19th at noon. Egypt closed schools and universities for 2 weeks on Sunday. The number of cases rose to 150 today, up from 126 reported yesterday. 3 people in Egypt have died from the virus.
And there's more. Kenya's schools and courts are closing after a directive issued by the president of that nation as the country recorded its 3rd coronavirus case. The government also suspended travel from any country with reported COVID-19 cases and directed government and private institutions to limit operations.
The government is suspending travel for all persons coming into Kenya from any country with reported coronavirus cases. Number 2, only Kenyan citizens and foreigners with valid residence permits will be allowed to come in, provided they proceed on self-quarantine or to a government-designated quarantine facility.
Public transport operators and hotel personnel have deployed hand sanitizers for all of their clients to use before accessing their services. Kenya and Ethiopia have now recorded 3 and 4 cases respectively.
Many scientists have predicted that Africa will be severely affected by COVID-19 because of weak health systems and hospital care. So far, the continent has been slower than other regions to see identified community spread, but it is still at a huge risk. David McKenzie has the story from South Africa.
Scientists consider this a worst-case scenario. Humanity tightly packed and under threat from pandemic spread. You could have, in some circumstances, hundreds of people just to one tap.
To one tap, yes.
In the informal settlements of Tembisa, health advocate Mpho Mofokeng says that even basic protection from the virus, like washing your hands, is unrealistic. So people talk about simple solutions to prevent this, but they're not that simple here.
They're not that simple for us. They can be simple there, but they're not here. I don't see it working.
So they're going to have to stop it before it spreads.
Exactly.
Public health experts predict that Africa could be hardest hit by COVID-19. They say health systems won't cope. But in the early months of the outbreak, there were few confirmed cases. Some outbreak models predicted that lag because the continent remains relatively less connected to the most affected regions.
Africa would be affected after the rest of the world.
And health officials knew the virus would come.
Any part of the world can be a risk to other parts of the world in this global connectedness.
The delay has given leading African scientists a window to prepare. In January, South Africa and Senegal had the only 2 labs capable of diagnosing the virus. Now more than 40 countries can test. And recent Ebola outbreaks in West and Central Africa have taught vital, life-saving lessons in quarantine and contact tracing. In many ways, Ebola, a frightening and deadly disease, is not as challenging, though, as COVID-19.
Well, if you're all in a meeting room and you're close together, all those people would be exposed. Ebola, none of them would be exposed. So the numbers get very high. No matter what South Africa does to contain, if everywhere else in the world there are infectious cases, and there's no way you can really completely stop movement of a respiratory illness like this.
That force of infection is powerful, and perhaps all they can do is slow the spread.
So we are clueless, all of us. We don't know what is corona. We just hear from the radio. Corona, I think. Corona has arrived, you know.
Are you worried?
I am. On a serious note, I am.
In Tembisa and across the continent, people are still anticipating the worst.
There's a chance you won't see the boys of summer hitting the field until the cusp of summer. Details are next on baseball, further delaying opening day.
However, business is booming in the NFL still. Which players are set to cash in and which Pro Bowlers are on the move? That's coming up in Anthony's Sports.
Originally scheduled for March 26th, Major League Baseball announced this afternoon that it will postpone opening day until at least the middle of May as it follows federal and CDC guidelines. The initial March 26th opening day date would have been the earliest ever scheduled. Major League Baseball will not hold its season opener again until May at the earliest, and if the season and subsequent postseason are saved, the World Series very well could go into the month of November. Meanwhile, the July 14th All-Star game at Dodger Stadium is in jeopardy. Reports emerged late Sunday night that the NBA is now considering a best-case scenario of mid-June for the resumption of its season. That scenario could include the finals being played in August. According to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, the league is also considering having its 30 teams play games with no fans, as well as looking into alternate arenas. The NBA is also researching the financial losses that would occur if it must cancel the entire season. Now, this is another reason those who know best are sounding the alarm bells when it comes to young, healthy people. Utah Jazz All-Star Donovan Mitchell was the second NBA player to learn of a positive coronavirus test. Yet today he said that he, quote, could walk down the street and if it wasn't public knowledge that I was sick, you wouldn't know it. Mitchell went on to say, I think that's the scariest part about this virus. Now, virtually all leagues have shut down temporarily except for the NFL. Because its games begin in late August, regular season games in September, the league gave the green light to its 32 teams to officially begin off-season business this week. That includes franchise tagging certain players, trading others, and agreeing to free agent deals as well. The Dallas Cowboys have placed the exclusive franchise tag on quarterback Dak Prescott. He was a fourth-round pick 4 years ago, but he is now in line for a long-term deal that could approach $35 to $40 million a year. Now, if Dallas cannot reach a long-term deal with him, Prescott will make $26.8 million in 2020. The most surprising news of the day involves the player who's been arguably the top receiver in the AFC over the last few years. The Houston Texans have agreed to trade DeAndre Hopkins to Arizona. In exchange, the Cardinals send running back David Johnson and a second-round pick to Houston. The deal also involves a mid-round pick going to the desert. Hopkins has 3 years left on an $81 million deal signed in 2017. Also on the move, a key defensive player from the NFC champion San Francisco 49ers. They will trade DeForest Buckner to the Indianapolis Colts for the 13th overall pick in the first round of the draft. Indy will then sign Buckner to a contract worth $21 million a year, which will make him the second richest defensive tackle behind the Rams' Aaron Donald. Now, so good for guys like that, and may we all experience the rise from the ashes that Ryan Tannehill has. The Tennessee Titans quarterback was gift-wrapped and handed to Tennessee last spring after a very underwhelming 7 years in Miami. Now, he's agreed to a 4-year deal with $118 million with the Titans, including $91 million in guarantees. This comes after Tannehill went 7-3 as the starter over the final 10 games, helping Tennessee reach the AFC Championship game. He did lead the league in passer rating, but I bring all of this up to ask, shouldn't Teddy Bridgewater get just as much as a starting quarterback? He went 5-0 in place of an injured Drew Brees for New Orleans, and at 27 years old, Bridgewater 4 years younger than Tannehill. His 88.3 career passer rating, just over 1 point less than Tannehill's. All right, meanwhile, the NFL also announced it will continue with the plan of the NFL draft as scheduled from April 23rd through 25th. However, it will not hold it in a public setting in Las Vegas as was previously planned due to the federal guidelines, recommending large groups not gather for the next 8 weeks. And the 146th run for the Roses is in jeopardy as well. Officials at Churchill Downs will decide tomorrow if the Kentucky Derby will go on as scheduled. It is supposed to occur on May 2nd. Now, over 150,000 people squeezed into Churchill Downs in 2019 for the first Triple Crown race, and more than $250 million was wagered on the Derby program last year. The NHL is looking at a May start as well at the earliest. It has given players permission to go home, even those who live outside of North America. And as we know, many hockey players live outside of the North American continent. That'll be interesting considering the travel ban that's now in effect. So again, as we talked about, this is a very, very scary time, interesting time, uncharted territory for sure for the sports world as a whole as far as we are all concerned. Right now though, the NFL business, again, booming right now. Millions flowing throughout the league, and happy to see you guys doing the whole
socially distant.
Yeah,
over
so close yet so far.
Yeah, but as you can tell, I've been practicing this for a long time.
Yes, indeed. So you're good to go.
But Anthony, the Olympics still going on, right?
Well, Olympic officials right now are saying that they are still going on as scheduled to begin in July. I wouldn't bet on it.
No.
But right now, they remain hopeful that they'll be able to go on as scheduled.
I agree with you. And Tom Brady is still socially distant from the New England Patriots.
As of now.
Of now.
Today's been a very interesting first day of this legal tampering period. All these deals become official starting on Wednesday. So we will see when and where the Patriots six-time champion will sign.
Yeah, it's just kind of courting and sparking right now.
Yeah, and it's the first time he's ever hit free agency, too, after 20 years in New England. So we'll see if he winds
20 years.
up back there in Massachusetts or not.
Whether they play or not is a whole different story. But for now,
there is that too. 6 months away from the first real game. So yeah, they have time.
All right, Anthony. Thank you. See you next hour.
Stay with us. Much more BNC Prime News coming up after the break.
We continue with our special edition of the newscast with the emphasis on, of course, the coronavirus. The White House reporting that Americans should now avoid gatherings of 10 or more people during the entire outbreak.
They also say people should avoid visiting bars and restaurants in person, and they say it's best to avoid travel right now. President Trump announcing the updates earlier today.
If everyone makes this change or these critical changes and sacrifices now, we will rally together as one nation and we will defeat the virus, and we're going to have a big celebration all together. It seems to me that if we do a really good job, we'll not only hold the death down to a level that is much lower than the other way, had we not done a good job, but people are talking about July, August, something like that. So it could be right in that period of time.
Federal government is not mandating that restaurants and bars close their dining rooms altogether, but some smaller municipalities are certainly taking such steps.
Yes, cities like Philadelphia, Miami, and San Francisco are regulating public gatherings and spaces with curfews. Some entire states are doing the same. And so much has happened so quickly, Fred. The United Nations is saying that school closings in 56 countries are keeping more than 560 million students at home.
560 million. Wow. Got so much more to discuss, and we will do that coming up at the top of the hour. We hope you'll stay with us.